Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about what are Python identifiers, what are variables, and what are constants. So in our last video we discussed that in any object-oriented programming language it revolves around creating classes, objects. Okay, so whenever you are creating, for example, you are creating a class or a function or a variable to write any program, we will have to give some names. So we give names to identify those objects or classes or variables, and these identifier is what we call Python identifiers. For example, humans have names to identify humans. That's why in programming we use identifiers to name any variable, classes, functions like this. Okay, there are some rules related to that. For example, Python identifiers can only start with a letter or a underscore. Okay, so for example, I want to create a variable name. I have to start it with a letter or a underscore. Okay, and these names can include numbers also, but they cannot start with numbers. For example, I can have a variable name A1, but I cannot have a variable name 1A, because when you say 1A is starting with a number, that is not allowed. And these Python identifiers, they are also case sensitive. That means small a is different than capital A. Okay, so like this you can create any identifier to name a variable, function, or any other object in Python. Okay, but there are few words you cannot use, and these such words we call it Python keywords. This means Python has already defined some meaning for these words, so we cannot use them as an identifier. There are close to 35 keywords, but with the new version of Python they can add few more. Okay, so basically these words we cannot use as an identifier, and the reason is simple, that these words have already some special meaning for Python interpreter. Python interpreter is like which execute your program. So if you try to give these identifier, Python interpreter will give you an error because this is not allowed in Python. Okay, and let's take one example. For example, if I say a is 5, here a represents a variable and 5 is the value associated with that. Okay, so we can say a variable is an identifier that associates a name with a value. So here a is the name, 5 is the value. Okay, so here we can say a is a variable. A is a variable. So when I write this hash and then, okay, so this is what we call commenting. So this part will not be a part, this line will not be a part of the code, but this part is a code. Okay, so Python interpreter will not execute this part, so we can use these comments as notes. Okay, now this variable simply means if I have to use the value 5, for that I can use this variable name, and its name is variable. Its value can change, so we call it a variable. So basically what happens in the background, there is a memory location that is where 5 is stored, that is called A. Okay, so we also call it variable reference because this refers to a memory location where 5 is stored. Okay, so for example, if I just say A and I try to print A, it will not work. I am getting an error. It says A is not defined. So here I have put a variable name. I have defined it but not initialized it. I have to give some value before I can use it. Okay, So variable name must be assigned a value before its use. So I have to give some value, for example 5, and after I am assign a value, if I run this, now it's printing the value 5. Okay. Now you can also take any value. For example, I can also print directly if I have some value 5, I can print that too. If I run this, for to run a program, you can click here. It says run selected cells. Okay. So now here I am printing value using a variable. Here I am directly printing. So this A is called variable. This 5 is called a constant value. Okay. These are two different things to assign a value or to print a value. You can directly print a value, or you can assign it to a variable and then use variable. But for example, if you are using print, let's say you are using A many times and you have to change the value, you have to only change at one place. So that is the advantage of using variables. Okay. And whenever you give any variable name, you should try to keep it meaningful. For example, if I am storing salary, I have to use something meaningful name. For example, salary is 5,000. Instead of, I can also say C is 5,000. So someone looking at this variable might not understand what is the meaning of C. So that's why whenever we use variable name, we try to give some meaningful name, which are self-descriptive in nature. People can easily make, what we are trying to store. Okay, so that is the use of variable. Now I can have now these are the reserved keywords. I cannot use them as, for example, I want to create a variable with else. It will not work. If I say else is, it automatically turns to green, because any software that you use to write program like Jupyter Notebook or PyCharm or Google Collaborator, they will help you to write code by using different color coding. So all the keywords, they are highlighted in green here, and variables, they are not in green. So here when I write this code, I will get a hint that okay, this I cannot use it as a variable. Okay, so if I use any other number, now I can use this as a variable, because now I'm using else 1, and we know that identifiers can start with alphabets or underscore, and later I can use any number if I want. Okay, so for creating identifiers, it has to start with a letter and or underscore, and we can use numbers. Okay, but we cannot start with numbers. For example, if I want to say, now if I want to print this will print. Now if I try to run this, okay, else 1 is working. Now if I make it 1 else, it will not work, because now I am starting a keyword with 1. Okay, sorry, variable, or you can give anything, AB. Now if I try to run this, I will get a syntax error. There are many types of error we get while we are writing programs. Syntax error means I am not following the rule of the language. That means Python doesn't allow you to name a variable starting with a number. You can use numbers, but not for the starting. So if I write here 1 or C2, that I can use. Okay, and if I take another one starting with, let's say, I can also start with underscore. So if I try to print here, this will work too. Oh, I have to change here. I am doing wrong here, so now this one is also working. Okay, because it starts with underscore, which is allowed in Python. Okay, so I will stop here for this video. In this video we learn what are variables, what are keywords, what are identifiers. Okay, thank you for watching.